What's up, everyone? Welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fly School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So we have more to discuss, talking about the development of a possible Superman game. Talk is basically spreading that it's possibly Rocksteady that will be developing this game. Now, this is from just conversations on the internet. Shout out to all of you that are actually adding to this conversation in the background. But I still think Warner Bros. Games Montreal will be in the running, actually in the strong running, to get the job done. There are many things that I glean from Gotham Knights as a full video game that helps me to see that this team has the competency to do that. However, you have to also contend with the fact that a lot of people haven't judged the game as one that they don't like, already have deemed it to be that the development team cannot make a game because they didn't like Gotham Knights. When I'm looking at things from the mechanics that they were able to put together in the game, even with the technical limitations that they had. Now, what were these technical limitations? There were many of them. One of them being the co-op side of the game, having an untethered open world, having a world that had the neon lighting, kind of in the Joel Schumacher style sense, which is very heavy on performance, and some other aspects like the Batmobile and the speed of the Batmobile, and so on and so forth. So we're going to look at that particular angle in regard to the limitations, and we're going to look at other video games if anyone has been able to pull it off, and we'll see who probably was, in my opinion, the more ballsy development studio to actually go ahead and do something like that. Now, at the end of the day, it is all, something where people will still come up with their conclusions, but from a technical side, conclusions only are very, valuable if they can weigh in all of the factors that are actually at play. This is how I actually see things. So when we talked about, this potential Superman game, I've been talking about, I say, Warner Bros. Montreal, they came out with 4 characters in their game. They were able to do some good cinematics, good combat. They were able to set up their systems very well. And if they were to harness all of that and put in one character, I see that there's a lot of potential that they can use to get the job done in making a video game surrounding Superman or maybe a single individual DC hero. Somebody in my comment section said, if they couldn't handle Gotham Knights, even though people like Gotham Knights and so on and so forth, how is it possible that they're going to be able to handle a character like Superman? And this, audience member of mine cited the Batmobile, or the Batcycle, sorry. And I laughed and I said, that's actually a very good point. I've been wanting to talk a little bit about the Batcycle because a lot of times it's compared to the Arkham's Batmobile. Now, some of you may or may not know, I actually did an experiment and calculated the distance and the speed of both of them. The Batcycle is half as slow as the Batmobile, literally 50% difference in their speed. And I did it by basically setting a marker on a point in the map, and I drove to that point, and I just basically calculated how long it took me to get there. Basically similar distance. When I realized that the Batcycle was 50% slower, it was kind of weird because I was like, why is it 50% slower? Why is it not like 30% slower or, even 70% slower? What was the big issue there? And I've been considering and trying to figure out why the developers would have gone with that, because increasing the speed of your vehicle in Unreal Engine 4 when you've developed it is literally by using a slider. You can program it in C++, or you can go into some of the engine settings and you can increase the speed by, numerical factors that you want, literally by changing the number. It's nothing crazy. It's not really a big deal. And I know people will probably make it seem like, oh, they couldn't even make the Batmobile, faster. Guys, it literally is a slider if you program it that way, or maybe a numerical value that you can type into the engine after having exposed it in C++ into the engine. I know how this stuff is done, so I can kind of, in my mind, kind of tell you. If you really also want to see an example, here is a tutorial that was done by, a set of game developers in Unreal Engine on actually how to set up your vehicle so that you can actually see that this is something that is quite available to developers as they're working with. The challenge, I think, that probably hit this development crew was the fact that this game allows for you to have an untethered co-op aspect of the game regarding how you play with other people in context. Meaning, if you jump into somebody else's world, you can also ride your Batcycle in that world, and the person can also ride their Batcycle at the same time. This hits performance very hard. The faster the Batcycle is able to go in this context, the more performance it's going to pretty much need, or the more hardware power it's going to need. thereby causing all kinds of different issues and limitations that you could find in these kinds of situations. With the PlayStation 5 and the Series X being the new gen consoles that I think are not even as, powerful as they've been, perceived to be. I mean, if they were that powerful, why are we getting rumors of a PS5 Pro? I told y'all, these consoles cannot necessarily thermodynamically do what PCs can do because they have to throttle their performance to be able to manage heat and temperature control. That's a whole different conversation nonetheless. And so if you were a developer and you found out that in making these batch cycles run maybe even an extra 20% faster is causing you to basically lose performance, your best bet is to go ahead and slow down this stuff. I'll give you an example. Elden Ring is one where you have co-op in the game. Elden Ring does not have untethered co-op. You could say, well, it appears that because the entire map is big, maybe you should be able to have something like that. Okay, but there are segments that you can actually only summon people and areas that you can pretty much go, by yourself. Here's where the limiting factor is for Elden Ring. They take away your spectral steed whenever you co-op with somebody in the open world regions. So everywhere you go, you guys have to literally leg it in such a massive open world. And people complained about that issue. Remember when the game first came out, some people were like, man, this is quite disappointing that me and my buddy cannot ride the spectral steed. Very few people consider the second layer, which is, why did they do that? Well, because from a performance standpoint, you're going to require for the game to perform very well for all characters to be riding on their own horsey and running all over the place, or one person going all the way over there, another person going all the way over here. And some games have been able to work past these limitations, like Far Cry to an extent. You and somebody can get into your vehicles, the Ghost Recon games. You can go almost wherever you want to go, but there are still some kind of limitation that you can kind of face in some of these games. Some engines even support it. Some, systems, some server-based systems in a sense. Like if you look at, say, games like the Ghost Recon games and so on and so forth, the way Ubisoft does their server, methodology and stuff is way more advanced than many other studios out here. And that's just a fact. I know some of you think very low of Ubisoft, but in research and development, actually one of the leading, game publishers that are out there that can get stuff done when it comes to games. They can make games perform like crazy if they really wanted to do that. I mean, they squeezed an Assassin's Creed into these consoles and made them perform decently. So that's a huge, achievement, but that's because their work in the scientific side of game development is very, very heavy. They literally do have all kinds of different research that they do with all their 20,000 plus employees. So when you think about these limitations and you think about how the developers went ahead to try to solve their, limitations and deliver the game, to me, I think that shows innovation. Even though for gamers, many people are just thinking, well, the Bat Cycle is not as fast as the Batmobile, so then it must be bad. They're not really thinking about the layers of all of these things to see, okay, maybe they wanted to still go ahead and still have you have a Bat Cycle as an alternative means of traversal. And they said, we're going to put this Bat Cycle in the game, come, hail or high water, or whatever it is they wanted to do. And they went ahead and dropped it. They could have scrapped the Bat Cycle. You were probably not going to miss it. And all they could have just done is giving you a heroic ability immediately the game started. That would have probably been a whole different case. Because some people complain about the heroic, abilities, like, oh, why do we have to unlock that in the game? It's an RPG. So, yes, I'm not a big fan of that, but usually developers will tie some things up to progression, of which a progression was based on you basically just going around fighting bad guys. So get a little taste of that and you probably get your heroic ability and so on and so forth. But you had the Bat Cycle. Some people like it, some people don't like it. But I don't think it's a reflection if you were to compare it to other traversal methods in co-op games. I don't think it's a measure on how you judge the development capability of a development team. I think the way they provide solutions is how you probably need to look at things, as well as how you judge the outcomes, is, in this whole conversation. Because everybody wants to look at everybody wants to look at everything that is right in front of them, but it's time to start to, pierce the veil as gamers, to start to look and say, okay, possibly what are the limitations here? I mean, another thing too that you can also throw in there is Star Wars Jedi. Jedi went for a lot more than the very first game. Jedi Survivor went for a lot more than Jedi Fallen Order. Fallen Order was quite the basic game. You know, everywhere you went with your, you know, just your feet. You did not fast travel. You could only leg it to your own destination. But then you look at Survivor. Survivor has, you know, you can ride all these different, you know, animals, and you can fast travel. There are more mechanics that are more user friendly, thereby upping the ambition of the game. But the game itself has gone through a lot of performance issues. So the development team is trying to resolve these, little complaints or concerns that gamers have had in the past. But in order for them to be able to do it, I'm sure that there are sacrifices that they've had to make in order to be able to put all this stuff in the game and push the engine even further than the capabilities that they're aware of, the engine being able to put out for single player games. So I'm usually in this place where it's a tit for tat thing. Developers are trying to solve problems. The initial problems don't get the best solutions until after they failed or made some mistakes. And so usually I'm like, okay, let's wait and see how they can go ahead and, finalize or resolve these problems. This is why I never recommend buying any video game, for the most part anyways. I just usually say, wait it out unless you want to jump in and be, a QA tester. But we YouTubers, that's kind of what we do. We take one for the team. So if you have the patience to wait, just wait it out. By the time the solutions eventually come, to light after bugs and everything have been seen, then you can engage in the game if you want, or if you say, I don't want to deal with this, that's also, your own personal preference. But by and large, I think this is, in my opinion, a very interesting conversation to have. We'll jump into more aspects in terms of like combat and, some other layers. And I think it'll be an interesting conversation overall. Does Warner Bros. Montreal have the juice? Can they do it? I definitely think, without a doubt, they can do it, because game development is about, finding, or asking questions and answering them. It's a very scientific process. And I'm a scientist, so I'm really drawn to the way developers solve these problems. And to me, I thought they were able to do a lot with what they got with Gotham Knights. But another video, we'll talk about, a few other things, and we'll see how that weighs in the whole conversation. So thanks so much for listening and watching. Appreciate you guys so much. Hopefully we'll talk pretty soon in another one. Peace out.